June 24th, Memphis, 1943. I grew up in this community called, it was in East Memphis. And they had like kind of a street name or a nickname for it. It might not even be a nickname, it might be the actual name. Some people called it Orange Mound, you dig, which really simulated the eastern part of Memphis. You said that everybody knew where it was, right? You had like South Memphis. That's where Bookaloo, Hank Crawford, George Coleman, Phineas Newborn. That's the area they went to school at, South Memphis. Manassas, Frank Lowe, them cats. I grew up in East Memphis. It was kind of like square cats where I was. You dig? I knew this. So I always sought out the cats in South Memphis because they seemed to be the hipper cats. You dig? I gravitated toward those cats. I just naturally did. In fact, there was this club called Curry's Club Tropicana. And they had these things every Monday night. They called them Blue Mondays. And I used to go to hear this band. This guy's name was Ben Branch. Ben Branch and then the Largos. So they'd have these dances. And even though I was too young to go, I couldn't wait to go. I was about 14. I'd go because that's where you saw all the pretty ladies with the shimmy dresses, with the hip dresses, and the music would be going on. And that's where I really started hearing the music when I was about 14. I remember seeing Ramsey Lewis there with Red Holt and L.D. Young, and actually people was dancing to that, They didn't build it as a concert, they just built it as a dance. But I remember I was about 14. And I remember I was keeping up with Ramsey Lewis because he had this record out called Black Eyed Peas, and Carmen was on it. Yeah, he did. Carmen, Black Eyed Peas. He was like a step in the other direction from Ahmad Jamal, more funkier. Ramsey Lewis, so, I was into that. But before then, my aunt, who went to Tennessee State with Hank Crawford, she turned me on to David Fathead Newman. I knew about him through the Ray Charles band, right? And my mother and them, they had these dances, man. And these dances, Hank Crawford's band would play, and David Newman would be in the band, right? And I remember how Hank Crawford used to count out like it was like a circular motion, and I thought he was hip, how he counted to tune and how he kept time. I said, wow, this cat's really cool, It seemed to, I was infatuated by the way he counted time. Because I knew, I didn't know, but I said, this don't seem normal, the way this cat count time. Seems like it's groovy. And so I gravitated towards the way he was doing it, just because I liked the way it looked and sounded. To me, I thought that was hip, And also, my aunt had fed me a lot of knowledge about Hank Crawford. And the rest of the research I did myself through Ray Charles. Ray Charles had those records out like live in Newport, you know. So I knew to listen to those. In fact, at the time, that's when everybody was talking about, they were patterning their bands off of Ray Charles' band with David Newman and Hank Crawford, Marcus Belgrave and stuff. Even Max Roach and them was talking about it.
I met Frank Lowe in California in the East Bay through musician friends, and saw him perform at the Berkeley Jazz Symposium in 1970, and I have a tape of that recording which Frank made and gave to my friend Jamuda, who was the piano player on the gig, and Jamuda passed it on to me, and I'm happy to share that with various people. I didn't take pictures at that point, and then Frank came back to Berkeley with Alice Coltrane's quintet with Archie Shepp, Jimmy Garrison, it's Clifford Jarvis on drums. And the first pictures I took of Frank wasn't until 1973 in New York, when he was playing with Rashid Ali at the Newport in New York Jazz Festival. And then he came back to Berkeley 76 and played in the Park with Butch Morris. The first time I saw him with Butch Morris and another bass clarinet player named Yogi, I don't know the rest of his name, and drummer Don Moyer on a performance, a gig that Smiley Winters and Ed Kelly, Peter Barchet were playing at also. After that, I moved to Washington at the end of '77 and didn't see Frank, well, I didn't see Frank again in California, but he would come. He came to DC Space a couple of times with Butch Morris and then with the Saxophonist. Then he came to Blues Alley in '96, I think. And then I would see him in New York at the Vision Festival and with various aggregations, and he played with Billy Bang quite a bit.
Horace Silverman was talking about it because they were swinging really hard in the late 60s, in the late 50s, in the early 60s. I was too young to know what I was talking about, but I did know that these same guys appeared on these records. So I was in it before I was in it, you know. So to me, that recommended, that to me that was a form of hardcore jazz, because it was like a crossover between, it was like R&B going into progressive jazz, I thought. And I noticed that Hank Crawford was really a sophisticated person. Not just Hank Crawford, that Ray Charles's band seemed to be sophisticated people. They were progressive jazz musicians. I thought they were playing hip stuff just as hip as anybody out there with the big bands. You know who they were talking about, Woody Herman, Count Bass and stuff. I thought that Ray Charles band, I thought they swung just as hard and were maybe twice as funky. You dig? That always got me. That's why, if you notice, that sax ensemble I did, there's a tune on there by Hank Crawford with Fat Head, called 4, 5, 6. I did that too. And then on the other sax ensemble, there's Hard Times on there. That also came about my Memphis upbringing, because I love those tunes. I remember my high school band used to play that song. Bop doo dee da da ba da, da da doo doo dee ba da ba da, da be da da. You dig?